This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, Margaret.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody?
So far, so good.
Excellent. It's a nice day, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll be up in sunny Astoria at 1, so hopefully there'll still be sunshine up there.
Right, you never know. You never know. It could be raining.
All right, well, we've got a quorum. I'll call this to order. Hopefully Todd will join us shortly. This is Charles Dice. I'm chairman of the Southwest Coastal Citizens Advisory Council. I'll let the other members introduce themselves.
I'm Linda Eierman from Arch Cape, member of the committee.
I'm Margaret Treadwell. I live up in Astoria and I'm a member of the committee.
Chris Anderson. I live in sunny South Arch Cape and I'm a member of the committee.
All right, thanks. So Ian, oh no, sorry, Todd. I guess if Todd were on, he could give us a liaison report, but why don't we hold?
We can circle back to that once Todd joins us. Hopefully he'll make it. And I just wanted to note Ian Sisson, county staff. We also have Gail Henriksen, community development director, Julia Decker, planning manager, and then some members of the public. We have Nancy Chase, Carol Johansson, Cheryl Magnuson Boyle, and Guido Paparoni with us today.
All right, so I'll hand it back to you, Ian, for the public comment section.
Yes, would anyone like to provide any comments at this time?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Ian. This is Guido.
Okay, Charles, I'm not seeing anyone else come off mute, so we can move on to any old business. I'm not sure whether there was any, but now is the chance.
And I also am not aware of anything we had from old business. Any of the other committee members have any old business to bring up? I just see head shakes. So why don't we move on then to today's review of Goal 6. And I suppose a good place to start would be with the tables, as we usually do.
Before we jump into the tables, did anyone have any questions on the memo from Gail or the background report on Goal 6?
I had a few questions. I'm looking at my highlighted areas. On page 5, there is a map that shows water areas in the county that are impaired. And it was a little hard to, I could follow the colors, but I'm wondering what this is telling us about the Southwest Coastal region. It doesn't look good.
Right, so not many areas look great. There's only a couple of areas here, which, only one of them is inside Clatsop County that is green and the attaining status. So I believe if you go to this map online, it's interactive and you can click on these purple areas and they will identify some of the reasons they were identified as impaired. So Gail, I don't know if you have any additional information beyond that, that more information is available online.
Yeah, that's all the information I have, Ian.
Okay.
Okay, and would I find the report by this number? That is integrated report, EPA approved. Would I find it by going to that?
Yeah, there's actually, I believe I put a link in here for the map. I'd have to double check.
Yeah, if not, we can distribute that link to you.
Okay, great, thank you. You know, a lot of this is done at the state level. So I was trying to, scope out where the local governments are actually participants. And I guess we'll talk about that as we go through the tables. Same with that. I was pretty shocked by this table about wasted food. Does anybody have remember what they say about the reasons for that? I mean, the statistics are shocking. On page 7. I mean, why are we wasting so much food? Is it stockpiling corn and whatever?
I think,
or
yeah, so Linda, this is Gail. I think there's a variety of reasons. The little sidebar that I pulled was actually a sidebar from another document. But if you think about the portions of food that get served in restaurants and how much of it doesn't get eaten, if you've ever been to a restaurant and watched the neighboring plates on some of the other tables, how much food gets left, or when we buy too much food, especially produce, that spoils before we have a chance to eat it. So I think there's a lot of contributing factors to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think also, ever since they started putting best before dates on everything, and by implication also on the grocery stores that have to pull all these products if they're still on the shelf. I think that's over the last 10 years, that's given rise to a lot more quote waste, although I think a lot of people are getting smarter. Certainly the grocery stores, I think, are donating that kind of thing to food banks and charitable organizations.
Yeah, well, I sure would love to see, a public relations campaign or something that addressed that and tried to educate us at how costly it is every time we throw something away. I guess it really, it's shocking, and it feels like it's something that is like, not like recycling. It feels like something tangible that individual people can do. And it's interesting that it is a consumer problem and not an industry problem. So we just think about that a little bit. Anyway, thanks.
So any other comments in general before we dive into the Goal 6 policy review table with policy 1?
Just for the record, Todd Lundy has joined the meeting. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, Todd. You're on mute.
Sorry, I lost the email. Would you like me to do the report on the countywide meeting?
Yeah, that would be great.
Is that on your agenda?
Well, we kind of skipped it since you hadn't joined, but we said we'd circle back when you got here.
Okay. The meeting was on February 18th. Topics covered were Goal 5, wilderness areas, natural areas, and open spaces. And what we do is review a composite worksheet, which is just like the worksheets we have, but the columns are for each of the planning districts. And the comments of the committee from that planning district are in each of those boxes. So if it were some policy, number one, then there'd be across all the comments from the various committees. And we discuss those and then do a composite. That's basically the way it works. And so that's my report. Next month, we'll be dealing with energy sources. That's a goal 5. And then doing goal 13, energy conservation. We haven't discussed either of those things, I don't think, yet.
Right.
So that was actually the topic of your previous meeting, was energy.
The goal 5 one, yeah.
And goal
Oh,
13,
yeah. Oh, right.
it was
Okay.
consolidated. So the Southwest Coastal Committee reviewed that last month.
Okay, good. That was what it was. That's right. Okay, that's the end for that.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Anybody got questions for Todd on the liaison activities? So hearing none, why don't we start with goal 6, policy 1. I had kind of, and maybe this is a good place to bring it up. I had kind of a generic comment about goal 6, and it's, my comment's really based from reading the OAR 660 text that was in the packet that Ian sent out. And in that excerpt from the goal 6 OARs, there's a section called guidelines, and under the section called guidelines, there's a spot called paragraph B, implementation. And under B, there's a subtopic number 2, where it says a management program well, it says plans should be taken into account methods and devices for implementing this goal. And that includes a management plan that details the respective implementation roles and responsibilities for carrying out this goal in the planning area. And that should be established in the comprehensive plan. So I'm not sure I saw that exact wording carried over into the Clatsop County goals and policies anywhere, but the notion that the county should have a management program that speaks to the implementation roles and responsibilities. So maybe either Ian or Gail can comment on whether that's incorporated somewhere in the plan already, or in the comprehensive plan already.
Okay, so this is Gail, and I think that we don't have what you would look at as a standalone area in the plan, or even a standalone document that's called a management program or plan. But I think what the policies in goal 6 and throughout the entire comprehensive plan are looking at doing is establishing and identifying those entities that are going to be responsible for implementing the policies, which is why you see a lot of this language that says Clatsop County shall work with state agencies, or Clatsop County shall rely on state agencies. So it's fragmented perhaps in the way it's put together, but I believe a lot of that information is already included.
It would be If it doesn't already exist, it would be great to have some kind of a roadmap available. Like if you're having this kind of a problem, who do you contact? Because it can be confusing with these various regulations and variety of implementing agencies. And that's something actually that I was just put on my to-do list for my job. So like if somebody is having a problem with like discharge into a creek or something, and they contact me, who do I refer them to? It would just be great to have kind of an easy connector to here's the contact for that type of problem.
And I think that's something that we can do independent of the comprehensive plan, and just do that as an educational piece on our website and have paper copies and do an informational type of campaign. I would be hesitant to actually include that in the comprehensive plan, because every time an agency's responsibility changed, we'd have to go back through the ordinance process and change it.
Yeah, and you never know, like when a phone number is going to change or whatever. But that would be a great resource to have, like on the county website.
All right, and then
I have a question too, Charles. General question. I keep getting caught out by reading provisions in the comprehensive plan and reading background materials, and then, having ideas, and then I find out that, the county has already thought of this, of course, not surprisingly, but it's in the zoning ordinances and not in anything that I've got here. And I'm wondering if there's any way to cross-reference, at least give us the zoning ordinances that might already exist, that are implementing, I hate to add to your load here, but that are implementing these policies so that we can actually see how things are being carried out or not.
Can you provide a specific example?
Well, okay. I was revisiting for this. There were several provisions that talked about stream and riparian setbacks again, that overlap with goal 5 because they have to do with water quality. And so I was reading some of the background materials and coming up with ideas. And then I just found out this morning that apparently you've got riparian ordinance that addresses at least some of this. And so I didn't know that. And so I didn't think to search the zoning ordinances. But I mean, I think just about everything in the comprehensive plan has implementing ordinances that seek to carry it out.
Right, Linda, I would say for the most part, we've been trying to refer to the sections of the zoning ordinance that implement certain comprehensive plan policies. And I'm certain that during goal 5, we shared our riparian regulations, riparian area regulations, and we looked at those during the meetings about goal 5. But I apologize if that wasn't totally clear what we were looking at. So we could, in the future, make sure it's explicitly referenced in these tables to make it a little easier to find.
Okay, I mean, the fault may be mine that I'm not tracking all this. It's a lot of information.
Right.
And that was just, it is, yeah. I'm just saying that's something that's been happening to me is I feel like, oh, I should know this, but I don't.
yeah, I would have to agree if there's, certainly if it's relatively easy to do, like citing a zoning ordinance paragraph as you're putting the table together, that would be great. If it's something that's more diffuse, then maybe it's not worth the time and trouble. But certainly something like riparian setbacks ought to be very specific enough that it'd be great for us not to forget to look in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, and just on that topic, so everyone knows, we have updated our zoning ordinance by combining it with the standards document. So we formerly, prior to January 9th of this year, we had the Land and Water Development and Use Ordinance 80-14, and then we had the standards document, which was a companion to it. So previously, the riparian vegetation, its standards for protection of riparian vegetation were in the standards document, section 4.500. Now, in the combined Land and Water Development and Use Code, those are found in Article 6. And the section reference is 6.5000, protection of riparian vegetation. That's the main place to look. However, there are also some other areas with more specific standards, like you'll see here, section 6.4220. These are additional standards for the Columbia River estuary, and then there are a couple of other sections like this that are specific to certain areas of the county. But the 6.5000 is applicable countywide.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Are you folks going to create a chart that cross-references your numbering from the old system to the new? Because an awful lot of the ordinances have been renumbered.
Yeah, we have one. I don't know that it's
on our website.
Okay. So here, Linda, is the land use planning webpage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go under supporting documents,
Okay.
here, LADUC Luwudwo code citation cross-reference.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
So this is what it looks like.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, so that's available on the website. On the left-hand side are the new section numbers, and on the right-hand side are the old section numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So then one last paragraph in this brief 2-page document from the OAR was under B, implementation, was paragraph 3. And again, it's speaking to these management programs. And it says the program should manage land conservation and development activities in a manner that accurately reflects the community's desire for a quality environment. So I'm really intrigued by the reference to the community and the community's desire for a quality environment. And at least in my mind, this again kind of harks back to, I think, a lot of our comments in Goal 1 about ensuring that the community is involved in many of these land use decisions, because nobody knows the area and the resources better than the people that live in the community. And so when there's decisions to be made or applications that get submitted for permits, I would really like to see something in a comprehensive plan that requires the county to engage with the community, to make sure that we're in compliance with this notion that's reflected in the OAR statement, that the program should manage land conservation and development activities in a manner that accurately reflects the community's desires for a quality environment.
Yeah, I'd like to address that for a moment. This is Gail again. When the plan and the implementing ordinances were originally adopted 40 years ago, that review was taken up, and it was determined at that time that certain uses would go through a particular type of process and how that process would be handled. And so we do continue to have community involvement. There is a planning commission that's involved in obtaining citizen input on projects. Not every project rises to that level of having to go before a planning commission or a board of commissioners hearing. Some do, some don't. But that process was established and remains in place to today. So I think that there is lots of opportunity for public input. To require public input on every building permit that comes through this office would not be practical, it would not be efficient, and there would be no way that we could actually implement that. So I think that the process that we have, where 40 years ago the community identified what required additional public review and comment periods versus what didn't, I think still works very well today. I know that there may be some members on the committee who might disagree with that thought, but from a staffing perspective, it works for us.
And
Well,
just to add to that, the have on the screen here, what Article 2 of our Land and Water Development and Use Code outlines the procedures for land use applications. So if you're looking in a specific zone at what permitted uses are, it will identify the procedure type associated with that use to review and approve or deny an application. So the procedures are further outlined here in Article 2.
I just wanted to say that this does kind of bring us back to goal 1, because we haven't heard anything more in a long time about the idea of setting up standing committees in each of the regions beyond this process, so that there is more kind of a network of reaching out. You know, the county can tell the committee something, and the committees can be responsible for making sure the community knows and provides information. I don't know if that's hopefully still on the proposal, but I do feel it's necessary, because we have, I think the biggest conflicts I've seen have been when the county wants to make one-size-fits-all decisions for the variety of communities, you know, in this county. And I just got really worried with the recent short-term rental thing of combining the ordinances so that we only have one for the whole county, because there are such different, you know, needs and goals, and I mean, it's a vast county with a vast range of things, as you folks who work there know. It's crazy. So I just would like to put in my 2 cents to kind of keep the idea of having a regional group that can be your conduit for providing information, and a two-way street. Have that become part of what we end up with here.
Yeah, and personally, I'd like to see this section 3, this sentence, reflected in the general policies document for Clatsop County, since it's straight out of the OAR, and it is a requirement at the state level. I like the idea of specifically calling out the desire and necessity to include the community's desire for a quality environment.
So is that something you want to see added to table 3, Charles?
Yes, either that or modify the policy 1 to include it somewhere, or wherever it fits best. But we can put it in 3, that's fine. So back to policy 1. Other than that, I had no comments on policy 1. I think retaining the policy and sub policies, I would agree with. And Todd, I think you had some comments on the wood waste processing.
Yeah.
Item
Which item is it?
item E is in Edward.
Oh, yes, I got it. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking wood waste is too general. It's hard to know in terms of what kind of wood waste we're talking about. We're talking about logging. We're talking about logging slash. Those are terms that would be clearer here, so that it's clear you're not talking about plywood and lumber from a construction project or something like that. Do you think that's necessary, or is it clear enough given that we're talking about air, water, and soil quality?
I think this sub policy E would include, you know, wood waste that would be, you know, offcuts of 2x4s or plywood scraps and things like that.
Oh, it would. Okay. Okay.
Right. For example, at the Recology transfer station here in town, they have a specific area for clean wood waste.
Mm-hmm.
So that's stuff that's not painted or treated, doesn't contain big bolts or anything like that. So they recycle that wood.
Okay, then I retract that. My statement is, I was assuming it was slashed you were talking about, and actually it's much broader, which the term works fine.
And we'll get to kind of have another bite at it on policy 5 that kind of talks all about recovery of wood waste. So
Oh, there we
anything
go.
else on policy 1?
There is a typo in policy 1.
Uh-oh, where?
It's just in C right there, Marine Drive. I think Marine should be capitalized.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, for
Curse
sure.
the editor. Yes.
Definitely.
All right, so policy 2 talks about the planning department working with DEQ. And there's a recommendation by staff to delete the policy because the data is collected and maintained by the state agencies. And I intellectually I can understand that. However, it would seem like there should be some kind of periodic, thoughtful review by the county. You know, I don't know how often, whether it should be quarterly or annually or something, but to just take it out and not have some comprehensive plan requirement to review it on a periodic basis, I'd be nervous about.
Well, this doesn't say the county has to have a database. It just says it has to monitor the state's database. Isn't that the idea? Maybe
Yeah,
take out the word keep.
Except the staff recommendation is get rid of the whole policy. So that's why I'm saying I personally, I understand that the county's not going to collect all the data, but the county should certainly, I would think, review the state's data from time to time to make sure it's still accurate, it still represents what's actually going on in Clatsop County. As
Yeah, but I
opposed,
think the staff's comment seems to imply that because they don't keep the data, they would like to eliminate the policy. But I think if we just took out the word keep and left monitor, we might achieve what they want and what we want.
oh, okay, perfect.
So just striking and keep.
Yeah.
Got it.
It more than the database, it's environment, because the county's going to notice when something is awry way before the state would and could call it to the state's attention. See, we're looking at monitoring the database, but it's also important that the county recognize at least problems that come up. Building officials, zoning officials will notice things that need to be brought to the attention of the state. I could just say, if you said would monitor its environmental database and local environment, or to include the local, I don't know how you'd say it, local environment.
Maybe it's just fine like it is with keep, because that meets your needs, Todd.
No, it doesn't. To keep its environmental database just means what you implied, that it's just, it's keeping it up to date, which is not of any service to anyone, since the state already does it. No, I'm talking about officials that happened upon a sewer pipe broken and draining into a creek. That's an environmental problem that needs to be solved. And doesn't the state need to know about those things? Or a restaurant that's dumping into the bay, something like that?
So Todd, I think my understanding of the databases that DEQ keeps is that they're monitoring air quality and water quality statewide. They have the technology and the staff dedicated to that purpose. So they're keeping a database of that information. So they probably would know better than the local officials, what those sensors are collecting and what data their staff are collecting.
That's all it's important. That's all it's about. In other words, the broken sewer line or somebody dumping water into the bay is not the state's interest.
That's not my understanding. I would, think we're looking at the data that would have led to, sorry for my scrolling here, a map like this.
I see. Okay. But in that case, I think that that we take the and keep out and we're fine.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments on policy 2? Okay, so policy 3 is talking about the cumulative effect of development on the county's environment and monitoring that. And the staff recommendation is to retain the policy. So I was in favor of that.
Yep.
I was I suppose I was a little curious about why the important to the tourist industry jumped in here. I think all of these things that we're talking about in terms of
Never mind.
proposals that would affect the quality of the air, water, or land in the county impact everybody, especially the people that live here. So I certainly wouldn't want to restrict it to just what's important for the tourists.
I don't see this policy as restricting it to just what's important to the tourists, but if you have any suggested language to replace that with, I can put it down here.
And residents, you could add in
So I just
important
put a
to
period
residents.
after resources and leave it at that.
Yeah, that's good.
I agree with you guys on that.
All right. Then policy 4. So now we're talking about a solid waste disposal site or an acceptable alternative. And the staff recommendation is to revise it to state the county will continue to support, promote, and expand the recycling opportunities, which I think is a great idea. The only suggestion I could make is to somewhere include the word, or the concept anyway, of incentivizing the private sector to do recycling, and maybe that's already part of some other goal or some other statement within the county. But this would be, using things like tax incentives or regulation variances or things under the county's control that would incentivize people like, what are they called now? It's not WOW anymore. It's whatever the recycling company is called now. To incentivize them to put more recycling centers in and to handle a bigger variety of recyclables. Recology, that's it, recology.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be
I think
my,
they're what they take is dependent on what the market's going to buy. So I think that has a lot to do with what they're taking. If we're going to have a policy regarding that, we should have something about the market in it, that they should be able to collect everything that they can dispose of on the market.
well, I think where I was coming from is and I'm dealing with this, or have seen this dealt with in some other places where they've lost the particular county that I'm thinking of has lost their private contractor recycler because the local ordinances on how you handle hazardous material and how you transport hazardous material and what's considered hazardous material got so onerous that it was really no longer financially feasible for that contractor to continue to operate the facility. And that's the kind of thing that I was thinking of on this policy 4 is to the extent that the county can make it, incentivize by tweaking some of these rules and requirements, an outfit like Recology to do more recycling. I think that should be part of the bag of tools that the county uses to encourage more recycling.
I agree. I mean, it's kind of a, you know, if we just say that it's dependent on what the market will accept, I think that's kind of setting a low bar. Because often with these kinds of issues, the free market really does not address the problems that society wants addressed. And so I would think it would be a role of the government, which represents the people, to do see what programs there are, see what ways there are to support increasing the number and types of materials that can be recycled in Clatsop County, because it's really quite a big problem. Just the amount of, like, I mean, if I want to recycle styrofoam, I drive to Manzanita to do it. That's an issue. So, I mean, luckily for me, I go to Manzanita for work fairly often, so it all works out. But, you know, someone else who doesn't have that would have to drive it down there, and I just don't want to put that in the trash. I went to the transfer station in Astoria to recycle light bulbs. They don't take them. You know, I mean, it's just, it's a problem. So I just think that there is probably a role. Maybe there might be a state program that the county could tap into. I don't know, but some sort of creative way to increase the types of recycling that can be done here would be good and might be worth spending some money on.
So if I could chime in with a couple of things, our zoning ordinance provides for solid waste disposal sites, composting facilities, transfer stations, and also recycling centers. I believe all of our standards come directly from state policy, from the Oregon revised statutes. And you know, as we've mentioned with previous types of regulations like Goal 4, for example, in the Forest Practices Act, we can never be less restrictive than state law. We can only be more restrictive. So I think right now we have a baseline that we're working with, which is just straight from what the state allows or does not allow, or how it regulates certain activities. So I guess the reason I say that is I'm not sure what specific incentives you have in mind from either a regulatory or other perspective that would accomplish what you're saying. And also to add to that, the only facilities that I'm aware of in Clatsop County for these things currently exist inside city limits and not in the county. So I guess I'm not quite sure what I should put down here for your recommendation.
Yeah, I'm so the best thing I guess I could do is, again, I hate to do this, but go back to the OAR Part B implementation. It says plans should take into account methods and devices for implementing this goal, including but not limited to tax incentives and disincentives, land use controls and ordinances, multi-use and joint development practices. So it seems like the state OAR anyway already contemplates these types of incentives for doing this, and my request is that somehow we capture the ability or include the ability of the county to do what the state says we ought to be doing, and which is offering some kind of incentive, or at least contemplating incentives.
Okay. I think I've got that down here.
Okay, are we on to the
Yeah.
Another idea? I would like to see the household hazardous waste facility, which I think it's great that the county opened that. I'd like to see that in the comprehensive plan as because it's super important. You know, the county shall continue to operate, just something like that.
Okay, so I have a question. When you say the county shall continue to operate, is that precluding us turning it over to an independent management company? I mean, that basically says you are making a commitment on the county's budget year to year, and we really don't have any control over that in the comprehensive plan. It's, you know, based on what the Board of Commissioners approves, based on a, you know, staff level recommendation. So I'm a little concerned about how that's you envision that being implemented over the next 20 years.
I think it would be fine if the county found private, you know, private party to operate it. So I'm not trying to preclude that at all. I just think that having one is the concept I'm trying to get to. So it could be the county and its delegee, or, you know, I'm not trying to write the language. I'm just trying to get the idea out of the comments and into the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. I just needed some clarification for my own benefit. Thank you.
No, that's actually a great improvement. Thank you. And then I had one other issue. I can.
Go ahead.
Oh, aspirationally, it would be wonderful to have a recycling transfer center in the South County and not have to go to Astoria for so many things. Or Tillamook, have to go to Tillamook County for things. Is there any chance we could aspirationally add that?
I don't see why not. I mean, if we don't ask for it, we're not going to get it.
That's right.
They're pretty clear.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of updating this plan feels like to me, you know, like what have we accomplished? And this policy really speaks to that. Like the transfer station was opened. It's a great improvement. Absolutely. But what do we see next? What's the vision for further improvements? So I like that, Linda.
I mean, this is an air quality goal, and driving 25 miles to take your recyclables to a transfer station, 25 miles each way, is not very good air quality policy.
Exactly.
So did you capture that, Ian?
I think so. I put down here in table 3 that there are no waste transfer recycling facilities in the South County, and just asked the question of whether there is a way to incentivize or encourage one to be created.
Right, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So anything more on policy 4? Hearing nothing. We can perhaps move to policy 5, where again, this is more specific to the recovery of wood wastes.
Yeah, so this one I think is where Todd was looking to, you know, the way this is worded refers to slash burning. So I think it implies that these wood wastes are associated with forest practices. So I'm not sure if that was the intent or not. It does kind of seem that way. So Todd, did you want to go back to your recommendation here for expanding on this policy? not hearing anything coming from Todd, but his video is frozen on my screen.
No, that was my fault. I was on mute.
Okay.
So are you saying that it is all wood waste, or is it this refers to forest practices wood waste?
So in policy 1E, to me that would have covered things like, you know, the clean wood waste pile at the Recology transfer station in Astoria. But the way policy 5 reads, because it specifically refers to the practice of slash burning, and you know, maybe that one was intended to refer to wood waste associated with forestry.
You're right. And in that case, I was thinking that we'd ought to expand. Wait, just see.
Is slash burning legal? Is it not prohibited?
It is legal, yes.
Oh, would you put I don't have the original back. Would you put that back up? Oh, wait, let's see what I've got here. Wood waste rather than. Oh,
So
okay.
I think the policy is saying, you know, that we should encourage practices other than slash burning for recovery of wood
Okay,
waste.
that's
And
good. Except for that, yeah, that's good. That's all.
yeah, and I think the staff recommendation is to retain the policy, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think it certainly in today's world, there's, you know, chipping, composting, all kinds of other alternatives. Maybe those weren't there when this policy was developed, but I mean, the policy as it's written seems to just be useful to say that we want that we do want to encourage it, whatever those things are. So I'm in agreement.
I go along with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you can build like biomass energy facilities that would use wood waste. But I think it can be a little bit of a heavy lift to actually get one, you know, built just in terms of cost before getting any revenue from it. So.
All right. So then we're on to policy 6, which talks about Clatsop Plains groundwater study. And the staff recommendation is to eliminate the first sentence and move the second sentence to the Clatsop Plains community plan. I personally, I have no problem with eliminating the first sentence. I think the last sentence applies to other places in the county that have lakes. So I don't know why that it wouldn't be appropriate to retain that last sentence, but the county obviously had something in mind there, so I'll defer to Ian or Gail.
Yeah, so Gail just sent a message in the chat that she had to leave for an 11 o'clock meeting, unfortunately. But my understanding of this policy is that it is about the Clatsop Plain, the area and the water bodies covered as part of the Clatsop Plains groundwater study. So when it's referring to lakes, it's referring to those lakes within the boundary of the Clatsop Plains groundwater study.
Okay, well, I'm being ignorant of Clatsop Plains. I'm going to say that it's fine with me, but I'll let the other members say what they're going to say.
It's fine with me. This is Todd.
Fine with me.
Fine with me.
Perfect. So policy 7, county is going to work with to maintain the quality of estuarine waters through participation in the Columbia River estuary planning process. And again, the staff recommendation is retain the policy, and I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too.
Sure.
Okay, policy 8, county shall cooperate with DEQ, state forestry, state transportation department to reduce non-point pollution. So, and staff recommendation is retain the policy, just change the names to reflect the current names for those places, and I'm fine with that.
I accept too.
What is non-point pollution? Definition?
So this
Go
would
ahead.
be this would be things like, you know, air pollution that goes everywhere, perhaps, or I mean, some people would argue aerial spraying is non-point pollution. Anything that can't be any type of pollution that isn't extremely localized, like a gasoline station having a leak from one of their gas tanks, that would be a point pollution.
That sounds about right. I would say, yeah, I would think about a smokestack as a point source of pollution versus a non-point source would be if somebody was excavating, you know, several acres of area to build a shopping center, and you know, it's a broad area where there could be stormwater and erosion runoff issues.
Okay, so it's where you can't really identify the source.
Or it's just such a broad area that it's not localized to a
Okay.
point.
I'm for accepting staff recommendation.
Okay, as am I. So,
Yes.
Yep.
all right, good. Policy 9, this is regulating the water rights so that all of the water doesn't get 100% of the water doesn't get allocated. So there's still some water left in the stream. Staff recommendation is to remove the policy because there's not really any way to enforce the policy because it isn't within the county's jurisdiction to enforce it. And I mean, I certainly like the concept. I think it's a great idea. I think we should do it, but I can't argue with the fact that the county probably doesn't have the authority to enforce it. So I'd be okay with the staff recommendation.
I want to raise the question of what happens when a county official notices that a creek is running dry, which should have year-round water in it, and knows that it's being used upstream. The state wouldn't know about that, would it? Do we need to have some kind of something in there that says the county will keep its eyes open?
Plus, I don't see what's wrong with having a policy that says the county will encourage and recommend, because we have, I bet we could go through the comprehensive plan and there's tons of them. Lots of things are in here with just encouraging and recommending. So if it's a good policy, I'd vote to keep it. Add the word encourage, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless we can rewrite it to capture maybe a different, something slightly different that, I don't know if it can be enforced, but at least conveys the same idea.
So like the county shall encourage state agencies to regulate the issuance of water rights, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
Me too.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Ian. So policy 10, subdivisions adjacent to major arterials shall address the reduction of noise impacts in their site plans. That sounds like a good thing to do. And staff's recommending to retain the policy. So I can't argue with that.
I support staff on that.
I mean, just maybe one point of clarification. I mean, being in such a rural area as we are down here in the south end of the county, it's kind of hard to envision what this might mean. But you know, having lived in a much more urban environment, I would assume this is things like for a new subdivision that, you know, let's say in Astoria or somewhere that was adjacent to 101, that in that case, perhaps the concept is that the county would require a sound wall or something. Is that kind of what this is here for, Ian?
You know, I'm not super familiar with what kind of conditions we've placed on subdivisions in the past. I would think about, you know, setbacks between developable area and the highway, you know, maybe earthen berms or tree lines, you know, any kind of natural or man-made feature that would help to dampen sound coming from the highway into the neighborhood.
Okay, so in any event, I'm in agreement with retaining the policy.
Well, you know, I can think of, you know, we have a lot of people here building along 101 now, those lots that are supposed to have the 25-foot tree buffers. And those buffers are not only for the visuals of, you know, keeping the highway beautiful, but they have a lot to do with noise. So I can see that this is important for all development, and even not just subdivisions. So I am wondering, does it have to be limited to subdivisions?
I mean, I think the intent of the policy is to provide the noise buffer for new subdivisions, which would be a much larger development than, I mean, if you think about in Arch Cape, the east side of 101 was platted a really long time ago, and those lots are being developed one by one. So that subdivision plat has already been created, and that 25-foot buffer requirement for trees along 101 is part of the development standards for that area. So again, I think the intent of this policy was for subdivisions. I'm not sure, you know, if you have another suggestion for a new policy in table 3 to address development adjacent to the highway, we could look at adding something there.
What does the term major arterials imply? Is 101 a major arterial? Is 26 a major arterial?
So those are road classifications. 101 is a major arterial. I'm assuming Highway 26 is. I believe all state highways are going to be classified as a major arterial.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'd certainly be okay with replacing the word subdivision with development, but either way, either leave it as is and put a new one in table 3 that's a little bit broader and just development in general. It's fine with me. I think it gets to Linda's point.
Well, I would changing subdivision to development would be a good policy, but we can write a separate one too. Whatever you would prefer, Ian.
I can put
All
your
it asks
recommendation down. I just wonder if to me, the intent of this policy is to address residential developments, to ensure that the future residents of those subdivisions aren't subjected to highway noise. So it's protecting future residents in these subdivisions from highway noise by requiring the developer upfront to mitigate the possibility of that noise affecting the new neighborhood. That's the way I would see it.
Well,
Yeah.
But I don't know that a new retail.
how is that different? How is
What is-
that different from my hypothetical? These new houses are taking vacant lots and taking down trees in order to put a house and making the noise in the neighborhood from the highway much worse. So
No, I understand, Linda. I think though, when I hear the word development, I think of commercial development, industrial development, mixed use development. So again, I think this
Okay.
policy is specific to residential. So I'm not sure if you wanted a noise buffer to be provided for retail developments and industrial developments also, or if you're thinking just residential.
Well, there isn't any industrial down here, so I wasn't thinking of that. But that's
Okay, well,
a good point.
these are countywide comprehensive plan policies.
Okay, I suggest this just be subdivision be substituted with residential development.
Yeah, you could say including subdivisions, but residential development, that might solve it.
It does.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Why can't we say all development adjacent to major arterials shall address the reduction of noise impacts in their site plans?
Well, then to Ian's point, now you're kind of requiring people that are going to put up an aggregate plant or a cement plant or, a commercial, a Walmart to have to put up potentially have to put up a sound wall. Is that reasonable? I don't know. Certainly for residential, I agree, because the poor people that live there, on an individual basis, they have no voice. But so I think it's important for residential, but I don't know how important it is for industrial or commercial.
Right. I would add that, we have data that substantiates the negative health impacts on humans of noise, such as constant highway noise. And so I think we can, support a policy like buffering residential developments from that noise with that justification of the data that's available. But I don't know if there's any data available to say highway noise negatively impacts a retail business, or the example Charles gave of an aggregate facility.
Hi, this is Julia. I just wanted to chime in real quick and say that part of what this existing policy 10 does is directs subdivision developers, who are usually larger developers, to take into consideration reduction in noise and noise impact when developing a larger number of home sites. And we do see it more up on the Clatsop Plains in areas where we have still some tracts of land that are good sized, really close to or on Highway 101, for example. And we have a little bit left on Highway 30. I don't know that there's much left on Highway 26, but the idea was for a developer who because when you do a subdivision, you are taking into account and you will be responsible for providing a lot of the amenities up front before you can get the plat signed and get your approval to sell lots. You need to get the streets in, you need to get the utilities in. There's a lot of pre-planning that you do not see at the individual house on a lot stage. So anyway, what this policy does is direct developers of subdivisions to take into account noise reduction at a larger scale. So that's what that is doing. And I don't think that there's an issue with adding residential development or adding actually another policy, if you want to, regarding residential development. But it is not about industrial or commercial development.
Well, would you rather have us change this one or add a second one, a separate one?
I mean, I think it's your recommendation, but I just want you to be aware of what it's for, because honestly, you're looking at it from the Southwest coastal perspective, which is fine, that's where you are. But as Ian said, it's countywide. So we're looking at it not just for your area, but particularly in areas where we still have tracts of land that large corporate developer types are looking at creating large subdivisions, frankly. So they have a higher level that they need to meet. So anyway, that is actually kind of the intent behind policy 10. If you want to add another one, or if you want to say residential development, that's fine. But I just want you to be aware of what this policy is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think it's important that it accomplish what it has accomplished and is intended to accomplish. So my vote would be add another policy that speaks more broadly to just residential developments to encourage people to not do what Linda doesn't want them to do in terms of individual property owners, just mowing down trees to improve their view and not respecting the potential noise problems they're going to create.
Well, I would personally suggest saying residential development, including but not limited to subdivisions, or including subdivisions. I guess I'd leave the word subdivision because that seems important to the county. But does there need to be a separate policy? I'm not hearing that.
Yeah, I'm okay either way.
So I've got residential development here. I don't know that it's necessary to include including but not limited to subdivisions, because that would be included already in residential development. And I also just want to remind the group of the time and that we have quite a bit more material to get through.
Yeah,
so if you feel comfortable with this, we can move on to the next policy.
Okay.
I suggest
You gonna say something, Todd?
move on is all I'm saying.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so moving on. At 11, I
suggest supporting the staff policy, the staff recommendation on
As
both
do I.
11 and.
Yep, I agree.
Yes.
Okay, policy 12. I kind of agreed with the staff recommendation because I've never even heard of a district conservationist, so I
agree.
During.
Staff recommendation is fine with me.
Okay.
Great. So that takes us to table 2, the Southwest Coastal Community Plan specifics goals. Policy 1 has to do with coastal and stream shorelands. So grading and excavation, et cetera, of the riparian zones.
If I could chime in here briefly, most, if not all, well, most of these policies we have reviewed previously. So if you could, and I think I included everything that I've collected from you so far in the way of recommendations through goal 5. So if there's anything additional that you think should be added now, having seen what goal 6 says. Let's keep the discussion focused on just those items that need to be added per goal 6.
Well, it looks to me like policy 1, though, we wanted to say prohibited, and this, is that being reflected here?
So your recommendations are there in green text, and in parentheses it says grading and excavation should also be prohibited.
Yeah, I thought we said prohibited, and this is instead of carefully controlled. I thought that's how it went.
Yeah, he's got that in the parenthesis at the end of the last sentence.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
Okay.
It seems to me that we're saying that a logging company cannot, or does that deal with Forest Practices Act? How does somebody build a bridge without involving the area around the stream, the buffers?
So
I'm
if you
not
look
sure.
at our riparian protection standards in the zoning ordinance, there are exceptions provided for water dependent or water related uses. So a bridge, inherently would need to cross a body of water. And so basically the standards say the disturbance of the riparian area should be the minimum amount necessary to be able to build the bridge.
Yes, but we're saying prohibited here, right? Grading and excavation, but that's within the context of this other.
So the first sentence says carefully controlled within the riparian zone, and then within the stream buffer, prohibiting grading and excavation.
Okay, and we're eliminating that part. Thank you.
Oh, I get it. Okay, I wasn't reading that properly either. I apologize.
Yeah, me too.
So I think policy 1 looks okay to me. So
Yeah,
policy 3, I think we did talk about, and you've got it captured in the staff comment. I mean, we'd like to see a 50-foot wide buffer, is I think what we discussed when we talked about this before, but I suppose we're going to talk about it again when we circle back to wetlands and riparian areas. So what do the rest of the committee think about policy 3? Are we okay with?
Well, I was researching stream buffers yesterday because of this and another policy in the community plan, and I wrote up a draft thing and sent it in, but I'm going to hold it back until I go and read the zoning ordinances. But what I was reading is that it's better to base your buffers in categories on either how large the body of water is, whether it's fish bearing or not, and it's a little more complex. So I'd like to kind of revisit the buffers, the riparian buffers again at future meeting after I take Ian's advice and read the zoning ordinances.
Well, on this topic, so we talked about this topic a few times during goal 5,
right.
about setbacks and stream buffers and things like that and what would be appropriate. So you might remember specifically, I believe, when we were talking about fish and wildlife habitat, we had the district fish biologist from ODFW, Mike Sinnott. He recommended basically what you're saying, Linda, which is to base our stream buffer requirements on the classification of the stream or river or whatever it is, and whether it's fish bearing and what the flow rate is and things like that. So that's a recommendation that has been made, and I think we'll also see this discussion come up again when we have that presentation from CREST.
Okay.
And this is Julia. I was just going to let you know that we are looking for that presentation from CREST. We're working on refining it. We've got some discussions going on about how we might implement the changes that are being recommended, the best strategies going forward for how to do it. And so you're probably looking at possibly a workshop next month.
Great.
All right, then I'm with Linda on letting this sit as it is and revisiting as part of the workshop, after the workshop.
Right.
Policy 4, I'm fine with that. I still recommend we include the word cobbles, but we've already captured that one. So I'm happy, nothing more to add for me.
It's fine.
Fine with me.
So then there's a public facilities policies that the staff recommendation here for policy 1 is that it's been implemented in the zoning ordinance for ACRCR, and they're recommending to retain the policy and apply it throughout the Southwest Coastal Planning Area, which I would agree with.
I would
There
agree
are
with it.
a fair number of policies that, it might make sense to think of them regionally in the county. We got a lot of criticism because Arch Cape had its own zoning and an overlay zone and things. And they said, oh, you're getting special treatment, but the Southwest Coastal region is different from the rest of the county, and thinking of things regionally is a really good idea. I like that. So I'd encourage the staff to do that. That makes sense.
On the same topic here, in table 3, one of the staff recommendations we've made is that, or the issue addressed is that uncoordinated stormwater treatment does not meet statewide planning goal 6 requirements for cumulative evaluation of impacts. And the recommendation is to establish comprehensive development standards for stormwater management and looking at applying specific standards for different types of land uses.
Yeah, that sounds like a good objective to me. So I'm in favor of that. So we're all in agreement. Policy 1 is okay. Or okay. So policy 2 talks again about stormwater is to be drained. I suppose that's where I was thinking your addition in table 3 is kind of pertinent to this policy 2. Is that what you're saying, Ian?
Yeah, I think it would probably relate to both policy 1 and policy 2.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with the staff recommendation here. Okay, I'll assume silence is agreement. So then we're on to rural land policies. Policy 3, all watershed areas need to be defined. and development in the surrounding vicinity shall avoid degradation of the water quality.
So we already spoke to this one. We said retain.
Yeah, I agree. So I think we're good there. And then conservation, other resources. Talks about watersheds protected by the Forest Practices Act. And the staff comment is that we've already dealt with this. And so the implication I get, or the assumption I'm taking out of this, is that staff is still thinking about how to protect the community drinking water sources beyond what's required by the FPA in some legal fashion. So you guys are still thinking about this, or you're expecting us to come up with some recommendations?
This is something that we would need to look at more closely as we go through the redrafting of the comprehensive plan and have it reviewed by county council and our state planning representative at DLCD and things like that, because we can't implement or adopt a policy that would be illegal. So it'll go through that review later on.
Okay,
Are
well,
we,
go ahead.
Are we convinced that the present Forest Practices Act is sufficiently strong that it can protect the water sources? I'm thinking of Garibaldi's issues. It's another county, but
Todd,
do we
sorry
know?
to interrupt. I think we've covered this issue many
Yeah,
times before, and
okay.
and we've talked about what it would take to amend the Forest Practices Act, and so that's still the same today. So what we've put down here is that if there's, as this comprehensive plan update moves through its review by the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners, if there is still a desire to go above and beyond what the Forest Practices Act regulates, that there would need to be a legal opinion on, how that could be accomplished. It is actually spelled out in statute how to go about amending the Forest Practices Act, and we've provided links to that information to you previously.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman who gave us the workshop on the Forest Practices Act was very clear that the Forest Practices Act regulates activities, a specific activity, logging. So like their setbacks and things have to do with logging activity. And the county separately regulates other activities on the land and uses of the land. And so they really are not overlapping. And so I don't understand why any references to using the Forest Practices Act, except maybe as a model, like, but I don't understand why those would even be relevant to this. I thought we were kind of on the wrong track, and then we got straightened out in that workshop.
So this policy applies to conservation other resources lands, which generally are forest lands and mixed farm forest lands. So I think this policy too, which we're currently looking at, is related to forest practices regulated under the Forest Practices Act, and not other uses that would not be regulated by the Forest Practices Act.
Okay.
So I know we've talked about it before, and not to beat the dead horse, but clearly the Forest Practices Act is under a lot of scrutiny with respect to watersheds. And hopefully there are going to be changes in the Forest Practices Act. But regardless of whether or not there are, I would hope that through the legal review, the county would come to the conclusion that in terms of protecting the county citizens who are dependent on the water that comes from a watershed that has timber on it and subject to logging by private companies, that the county would conclude that they have some degree of authority to ensure that the water that comes out of that watershed is not degraded. And I don't know that I'm looking for an answer for it. I just am kind of making the statement and saying I'm waiting for this much anticipated legal review at some point.
Understood.
Okay, issues to be addressed. So clean water, state revolving fund, failing septic systems. I like the first, the issue to be addressed in the proposed solution sounds good to me.
Important, yes. I think that's a good thing to include.
And then the next three, it looks like the next three issues are all related or interrelated and dealing with wildfires and smoke generated, toxic chemical release, air pollution, landslides, flooding. And the proposed solution is to increase public awareness, if I simplify it.
Correct.
I was trying to think of something more strong to propose as a solution, but I can't. At least nothing that I can think of that would be implementable other than, avoiding forest fires. But I don't know that the county's what the county could do in that area. So for lack of a better solution, I guess I'm fine with this one.
I'm okay with it as well.
I like it.
Okay. So now we're on to another, to me, this is a really big issue, this solid waste disposal site. And I'd sure like to see a stronger statement like the county will identify and work towards a future site as opposed to working with, but that may be, just because I want it to be so, that may be an overreach. But right now, for people that are on septic systems, when they have their septic tanks pumped, it either has to go up to Warrenton or down to Tillamook. There's not anything in between. And not only is that expensive for those people that have septic systems, but it's, putting a 1,000-gallon truck on on a 50-mile journey each way every time they're going to pump a septic system. And there are a lot of people in this county on septic systems. So that's an awful lot of truck driving around. So I think this is an important one. And if there's anybody's got any suggestions on how to make it, beef it up, I'd sure be open to those suggestions.
You know, I feel this is written from a current thinking point of view. It needs to be done. You know, the land's in private ownership, but we're supposed to be, aren't we supposed to be envisioning how we want things to be in 2040? Isn't that the whole point of this Class of 2040 project? So it seems like the county needs to bite the bullet and just say they're going to identify a site and build it, you know? And how you do it is, I guess I'm agreeing with Charles, is we should put the goal, and then you can worry about, you know, how you're going to get the land. That's a process issue.
And the county already owns lots of land, so I'm in total agreement with what you're saying. I don't think it's an impossible goal. I don't think it's an impractical goal. I think the county just has to decide it's important enough to do it.
I mean, the alternative is to get everybody who's on septic onto a public water system, you know, or a district water system. That seems like those are the two choices. Either let septic continue and take responsibility, or, you know, make a goal of banning septic by year 2035 or something.
So what I've done here is I struck with private landowners. So it just says Clatsop County will work to identify a future site or sites and so on. With regard to the last comment made by Linda, we will circle back to that topic when we get to goal 11, which is public facilities and services, and goal 14, which is urbanization. And we'll probably find that it would be immensely difficult to put everybody on sewer because of what those planning goals say. But I think striking with private landowners captures what you're saying, because, you know, what I was hearing is maybe it could be a county owned piece of land or other land that's already in the public domain.
But it doesn't have to be. I mean, that's up to the discretion of the county, is where they cite it. We're just saying you've got to cite it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd like it to say Clatsop County will identify a future site or sites. And that's what we should say. No.
And then build it. Isn't that what we want to?
Yes. I mean, presumably, if they identify a site, then.
Well, it says installation, which does that mean? I think that means build, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess you know, they could identify the site and then not build it, but that would seem to be counterproductive. So whatever
Oh, but
wording,
it happens, you know.
whatever wording is. But for me, if you just the county
implementation piece, you know, I think what we're looking at is whether it would be possible to accomplish the construction by 2040. I understand that's the goal. But I'm not sure if that's something that we can put into a policy.
I'm satisfied with it the way you have changed it there, Ian.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Okay, organic. Now we're on the organic waste in fill as opposed to septage. So this one,
I would have the same thing.
yeah,
Just
I would agree. Just, will identify. So anything else? So then the uncoordinated stormwater treatment, I think we talked about this a little earlier, and I like the solution of setting up a comprehensive set of development standards for stormwater management. So that seems to address the problem to me.
It's fine with me.
Everybody okay with everybody else?
Yep.
All right, good. So then the last one is quality of life issues associated with changes to work patterns and impacts from home occupations. And the solution is established. I'm not exactly sure why noise somehow bubbled to the top on the proposed solution side as opposed to other things like traffic.
Parking.
So those are things that are already regulated by our home occupation standards. There currently are no standards for noise emissions from a home occupation. So that was something that we were proposing to add.
may
Okay.
we add short-term rentals to home occupations for purposes of noise standards?
I think they're probably two different animals, but if that's something you want to address in a separate policy, we could look at that.
What is home occupation? Just means someone occupying the home.
A home occupation would be like a business that you run out of your home. So, for example, if you were
Tax preparer, a financial advisor,
right,
yoga instructor. I'm thinking of the ones that we've had disapproved in the past.
there's like, if you had an in-home hair salon where you took a client at a time in your basement, or an in-home massage therapy or other type of therapy business, things like that. Some more intensive types of home occupations are also possible, probably more in spread out rural areas, like if you had a wood shop and you made custom furniture or something like that. So those are ones that might have a larger noise impact, where if you're running a table saw or a router all day long, you could really start to annoy your neighbors. So that's more what we had in mind with this policy recommendation.
Well, you left out bed and breakfasts, which are home occupations. That's why I brought up short-term rentals, because there's, this is one of my things is there's no reason to make a distinction between those two. They should be treated the same. Now that's, I know, not what we're doing here, but that's why that was my thinking. Is you say home occupation, I think bed and breakfast. But I don't have any problem with this as far as it goes. It just is leaving out a big category that we're not going to make short-term rental policies here.
Hi, this is Julia. I just wanted to point out that a bed and breakfast is a home occupation. A short-term rental is not. So this policy was actually aimed at home occupations. Short-term rentals the house is not occupied by the owner. The whole point is apparently that they are not there. But a bed and breakfast is, of course, owner occupied. That is actually a requirement of a bed and breakfast. So that's why it's classed under home occupations and short-term rentals are not. So anyway, if you want to do something with short-term rentals separately, that, you know, is a goal that you could put together.
Yeah, I suggest we do that and accept this as it is.
Yeah, I would strike the STRs and deal with them separately.
Well, bed and breakfast, Julia just said, is already included. We don't need to apply to bed and breakfast as having it additional language, do we?
So they're classified as a home occupation, but they have two distinct sets of standards.
Okay,
So I think it makes sense to include another sentence here to apply to bed and breakfast as well.
very good.
All right.
Okay,
think
I
we
have one more.
gotten through this.
May I
Okay,
add another one?
please.
Coming back to the beginning, food waste. This was a big deal in our materials, and I don't see any policies that come anywhere near addressing them. So I would like to propose that food waste is the issue to be addressed, and that we should create a policy that reads somewhat like the second one here about the indirect hazards of wildfire, which is that Clatsop County, in addition with the Public Health Department and appropriate state agencies, will work to increase public awareness of the indirect hazards of food waste. And these include impacts that we have listed in that sidebar that you folks provided us.
Okay, I've got that one down.
Thank you.
I support that.
Yep, me too.
That looks good. Yep.
Okay, I think we have gotten through goal 6. So we have a few minutes for public comment. Leon?
Yes, I will just go through in the order these folks are on my screen. Nancy Chase, did you have any comments at this time?
Yes, I did. Thanks for everybody for spending their time on this. Regarding the recycling and transfer station for the south end of the county, I would just recommend that the Clatsop County work with Tillamook County on the Cardam side, which is much closer and should be able, I think maybe there'd be strength in numbers on getting that to work well again. And then on the septic, all the short-term rentals in getting their permit had their septics tested to make sure they were in good working order. And maybe they're working with DEQ. There'd be something to get the other residential units to have theirs checked every 5 or 10 years, just to make sure they're in good working order. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, Carol Johansson, did you have any comments? Hearing none. Cheryl Magnuson Boyle, I noticed you submitted some things in the chat, so if you wanted to reiterate those items and anything else, please go ahead. Okay, she may have stepped away. Did everyone see Cheryl's comments there in the chat?
Yeah, she said she has a repairman there
Yep.
now.
That was Margaret, I think. So
That was Margaret.
Oh, okay.
Cheryl had mentioned that the zoning ordinance language was confusing as to where riparian setbacks applied. So as staff, what I would say on that one is, you know, it sounds like we'll probably eventually be updating those standards based on whatever policies are implemented through the comprehensive plan update, and hopefully those will be much more digestible. And in the meantime, while we're working with what we have, please contact county planning staff if there are any questions about which rules apply where. And then she had also recommended putting in a community-wide sewer system. Again, that would come up under goal 11 and goal 14. So we can circle back to that discussion. But again, I think it would be quite a difficult lift, if not impossible, to do that. And I'm not sure if countywide or community-wide means countywide or just in you know, rural community areas. But again, we will revisit that when we get to goals 11 and 14. So finally, Guido Paparoni, would you like to provide any comments?
Yes, Mr. Ian, thank you. First of all, thank you for accepting public comment both at the beginning and the end of this meeting. Kudos to you and the staff to do that. You're setting a really good example for other entities of the county to follow. I'm sorry I have to do this again, but I do want to reiterate a comment I did last time because we spoke about it today. And it was about the issue of clearing trees to building homes. And I want to say again that every member of this committee had to clear trees to build their homes. People have the same property rights. I don't understand why there's this trail in all these meetings of the rule of first capture, where people that are there have more rights than people that are coming in. And I just want to reiterate that I don't think this is correct. Everybody has the same property rights. You need to walk your talk. Thank you, Mr. Ian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paparoni. I'll hand it back to you, Charles, for any closing comments.
All right, I think we're within 2 minutes of our ending time, so I don't have any comments further.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Guido, is it not the case where trees can be removed within the area of the house?
So if I could just, as staff, clarify, it really depends on where you're talking about removing trees in terms of how the property is zoned. So in the Arch Cape Rural Community Residential Zone, we require in the development permit application identification of trees to be removed. And the general rule or development standard is that tree removal should be the minimum amount necessary to be able to accommodate the proposed development. So those are the standards we have, Todd.
That seems reasonable. Why is Guido concerned about it? Hard to know.
I'm concerned about because in particular, one member of this committee back in the early or the late 1990s cleared a whole lot to build his house. And the same member of the committee then in the previous meeting and the meeting before that brings forward that other people should not cut trees. So all I'm asking is to realize here that everybody has the same rights, whether you cleared your lot 20 years ago or whether you don't do it tomorrow. I'm just asking you guys as committee members that you keep that in mind when you make those comments. Everybody has the same property rights, and you shouldn't be restricting people's property rights going forward, in particular when you enjoyed those property rights when you constructed your homes. That's the point I'm trying to make.
But Guido, things change. I mean, I bought a piece of property that I thought was good for building a home, and it turns out it's a wetland, so I can't can't build there.
That's a fair point. I think the point I'm trying to make is a different one, which is
Okay.
everybody has the same property rights.
Yeah, and I think you've made your statement, Mr. Paparoni. I don't really think we need it again. So unless anybody has anything else to add, I would make the motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you all, and we'll see you next month. The next meeting date will be April 14th, 10 a.m.
I had something to add.
Meeting again, and we will be discussing goal 8.
I had
Thank you,
something to
everyone.
add, and I was muted. When
Ms. Boyle, I'm sorry, but the meeting has been adjourned. We went
But
through
I
the
was
public comment period earlier, and we went through your comments that you had provided in the chat. So I apologize, but if you have any comments you'd like to share with the group, you can send them to me by email,
okay, I
and I
will.
will distribute
But
those. Thank you.
let me make a statement that Charles muted me. When there was asked for any more
I don't
comments.
think Charles has the ability to mute anyone, actually. So
Okay. Well, somebody did.
thank you, Cheryl.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
You know